Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're zeroing in on something pretty important in International Tax Action 6 of the OECD's BEPS project.
That's right. The full title is a bit formal: Preventing the Granting of Treaty Benefits in Inappropriate Circumstances.
Right, a mouthful. But really what we're talking about is stopping treaty abuse.
Yeah,
Treaty shopping.
exactly. Tax treaties exist to stop double taxation, make things easier across borders. But some arrangements, well, they twist that.
Leading to double non-taxation instead.
Precisely. Action 6 is about making sure the benefits go to those genuinely doing business in the treaty countries, not just, well, structures set up to game the system.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we're looking at the OECD reports on Action 6 itself, the OECD Model Tax Convention, and also thinking about how this could impact things here in Mexico under the LISR, the income tax law.
Yep.
Our mission then is to kind of break down Action 6, see how it might apply in Mexico, and look at the risks, but also maybe some opportunities for businesses. Keep it clear, actionable.
Sounds good. So the starting point for all of Action 6 is really understanding the, let's say, the spirit of tax treaties, their object and purpose.
They're not just random rules, right? There's an intention behind them.
Exactly. They're meant to facilitate trade, investment, by removing that double tax barrier. Action 6 just reinforces that benefits shouldn't apply if, the main point of a deal was just to grab a tax break that goes against that original intention.
And the OECD's own commentary on Article 1 of their Model Tax Convention, that lays groundwork for this.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Paragraphs like 9.5, 22, and others, they really emphasize that you have to look at why arrangements are made, the context, the purpose. It's about genuine economic activity, not just clever legal structures exploiting loopholes, substance over form.
Can you give us an example, like the one from the report?
Sure. Imagine you have TCO and State T. It holds shares in Socanasti State S. State T's treaty with State S has, say, a 10% withholding tax on dividends. But State R has a treaty with State S with only a 5% rate. So TCO sets up a subsidiary, ARCO, in State R, and assigns the dividend rights from SCO to ARCO.
So the dividends flow through ARCO just to get the lower tax rate.
Precisely. The principal purpose there is clearly to access the better treaty rate via State R, even if TCO has no real business substance in State R. That kind of arrangement is exactly what Action 6 targets because it undermines the purpose of the State R-State S treaty.
Got it. So to fight this, Action 6 brings in specific anti-abuse rules. What are the main ones?
There are two big ones. First, the principal purpose test, or PPT. And second, the limitation on benefits rule, the LOB.
Okay, let's start with the PPT. What's that about?
The PPT is a sort of general anti-abuse rule. Basically, it says treaty benefits can be denied if getting that benefit was one of the principal purposes of the arrangement or transaction.
One of the principal purposes, not necessarily the only purpose.
Correct. That's a key point. It doesn't have to be the sole driver, just a main one. But there's a second leg to it. You also have to consider if granting the benefit in that situation would actually contradict the object and purpose of the relevant treaty provisions. So it's purpose and intent.
That sounds like it requires some judgment. How do tax authorities figure out the principal purpose?
Well, it's not always easy. They need to look at all the facts and circumstances, the structure, the timing, the economic reality, or maybe the lack of it. Was there a genuine business reason apart from the tax saving? It's moving towards substance, like we said.
So for businesses listening, you need to show a real commercial rationale, not just a tax angle.
Absolutely. Pure tax efficiency isn't enough justification on its own anymore. You need that underlying business activity.
Okay, that's the PPT. What about the LOB rule, limitation on benefits? You said it's more specific.
It is, yes. The LOB is much more targeted at typical treaty shopping structures, often involving conduit companies. It actually draws on rules already used in treaties by countries like the US, Japan, India for years.
So it's not entirely new territory then.
Not entirely. The idea is to set objective tests. A company resident in a treaty country has to meet certain criteria to prove it's eligible for benefits.
Objective criteria.
Like what? Things like being a qualified resident. This could depend on whether the company's shares are publicly traded, who its owners are, their residency, and crucially, the scale and nature of its actual business operations in that country. Is it just a nameplate or is there real substance?
So it's trying to filter out those shell companies you mentioned.
Exactly. If you don't have sufficient economic ties or substance in your country of residence, the LOB rule might block you from accessing its treaty benefits with other countries. The OECD developed a detailed version and a simplified one, giving countries options.
And I remember reading the U.S. updated its own LOB rule around that time, too.
Yes, that happened, and it fed back into the OECD's final work. The final versions of the LOB and its commentary were slated for early 2016, meant to slot into the big multilateral instrument, the MLI, which helps update treaties efficiently.
Okay, so you have the broad PPT and the specific LOB. But what if a company has a good reason for its structure, but technically fails one of these tests? Is it game over?
Not necessarily. That's where competent authority relief comes in. It's a sort of discretion mechanism.
A safety valve.
Kind of, yeah. Even if you don't meet the strict letter of the PTT or LOB, the tax authorities, the competent authorities in treaty language of the countries involved can agree to grant the benefits anyway.
How does that work? Do they just decide?
They have broad discretion, but it's not arbitrary. They have to look at all the facts and circumstances. And importantly, one country can't just deny benefits unilaterally under this relief provision. They must consult with the competent authority of the other country first.
Ah, so they talk to each other.
Yes, it's linked to the Mutual Agreement Procedure, Article 25 in the OECD model. It ensures consistency and lets them figure out genuine cases. They can grant all the benefits, some of them maybe put conditions on it, like a time limit.
Okay, that's helpful context.
Yeah.
Now let's bring this home. What does all this mean for Mexico?
Well, Mexico is an OECD member, and it's generally committed to implementing BEPS measures. So we can expect these Action 6 principles to filter into Mexico's treaties, either through the MLI or bilateral negotiations, and potentially influence how domestic law is interpreted, too.
So Mexican companies with structures abroad or foreign companies investing into Mexico, they need to pay attention.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If a Mexican group uses, say, a Dutch holding company to invest somewhere else, or a U.S. company routes investment into Mexico via, I don't know, Luxembourg, the Mexican tax authorities, the SAT, will likely apply more scrutiny.
They'll be asking why that structure exists. Is it just for the treaty benefits?
Exactly. They'll be looking for that genuine business purpose, that economic substance. Is the holding company just a conduit, or does it perform real functions? The burden of proof really is shifting more onto the taxpayer to justify their arrangements.
How do you see the SAT applying the PPT or maybe an LOB rule in practice?
It'll likely come through their interpretation of existing treaties, focusing on that object and purpose element. If a structure looks like its primary goal is avoiding Mexican tax, especially withholding taxes on payments leaving Mexico, they might challenge it using these principles. Lack of substance in an intermediary company will be a big red flag.
Okay, so what are the concrete risks for businesses then, if you're operating in or with Mexico?
Well, number one is definitely increased scrutiny. Expect more questions about cross-border setups,
More audits.
potentially, or at least more detailed information requests. The big risk, of course, is the denial of treaty benefits. That could mean higher withholding taxes on dividends, interest, royalties paid from Mexico, or it could mean profits getting taxed fully in Mexico and potentially again elsewhere if benefits are denied. That's double taxation, the very thing treaties are meant to prevent.
Ouch. That hits the bottom line hard.
Absolutely. And linked to that is the need for much better documentation. You'll need to proactively document the commercial, non-tax reasons for your structures. Just saying tax efficiency won't cut it.
So more compliance work, more potential costs, any uncertainty too.
Yes, especially in the initial phases. How exactly these rules will be interpreted and applied by the authorities and maybe even the courts in Mexico. There could be a period of adjustment and some gray areas.
It sounds quite challenging. But you mentioned opportunities earlier. Is there an upside to any of this?
Surprisingly, maybe. I mean, this whole push forces companies to look hard at their structures. It's an opportunity to review, maybe simplify, and make sure operations align with real economic activity and treaty intentions. Doing that proactively could actually lead to more tax certainty in the long run.
Because a structure built on solid ground is less likely to be challenged later.
Precisely. If your setup reflects genuine business activity, it's inherently more robust. Also, that competent authority relief mechanism we talked about, it's a safeguard for multinationals with legitimate complex structures that might technically fail a test but aren't abusive.
So if you have good reasons, there's still a path.
There's a path to make your case, yes. And maybe, just maybe, this focus on substance helps level the playing field a bit. It discourages the really aggressive structures that might give some companies an unfair advantage over others operating more straightforwardly in Mexico.
Right. Okay, so if we were to boil this down, what are the key takeaways from our deep dive on BPPS Action 6 for everyone listening?
I'd say 1. Action 6 is all about stopping treaty misuse. Two, the main tools are the PPT and LOB rules, focusing on purpose and substance. Three, for Mexico, this means expect more scrutiny of cross-border deals needing solid business reasons, and good documentation is crucial.
And the risk is losing treaty benefits, leading to higher taxes.
Yes, that's the core risk. But four, there's an opportunity here to review your structures, align them with substance, gain long-term certainty, and use competent authority relief if needed.
Got it. So this conversation gives you a foundation, but obviously the devil's in the details of specific treaties and how Mexico implements and interprets these rules over time. Definitely something to keep digging into.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. As these tax rules globally shift more towards substance and intent, how do you see multinational businesses adapting? How do they balance tax efficiency with demonstrating real economic activity where they operate? It raises some big strategic questions, doesn't it? What other questions does this spark for you about the future of international tax?